I knew something was wrong the second I heard that paint can hiss outside my kitchen window. It was too early for county business, too cold for road work, and too quiet for anybody to be standing at the edge of my land marking my fence like they were tagging evidence at a crime scene. By the time I stepped onto the porch with one sock half pulled up and coffee still burning my hand, 3 county trucks were sitting in the ditch. A man in a tan jacket was spraying bright orange lines across my posts, and my neighbor across the road was watching from behind his mailbox like he had bought front row seats. My name is Mason Reed. I am 52 years old, and I have lived outside Briar Falls, Kentucky long enough to know that when men with clipboards show up before 8 in the morning, they are not there to bring good news. My place was not much to brag about if you looked at it from the highway. Just 5 acres, a gravel drive, an old red barn with a roof that complained every time the wind picked up, and a line of cedar and steel fencing I had put in with my own 2 hands back in 2012. But to me, it was home. And I mean that in the old-fashioned way. Not real estate, not investment property, not some cute country lifestyle for people who buy boots online and call it farming. I mean home, as in the place where my dad taught me how to sharpen a mower blade, where my mother planted daylilies along the ditch because she said even a poor row deserved flowers, where I buried 2 dogs in one marriage and somehow still woke up every morning grateful to see the sun slide over the pasture. So when I saw those orange marks crawling across my fence posts, I felt something tighten in my chest before anybody said a word. The man with the clipboard came toward me like he had practiced the walk in a mirror. Slow, official, chin up, boots clean enough to make me wonder if he had ever stepped in real mud in his life. He was maybe mid-50s, square jaw, grey moustache, bearded sunglasses even though the sky looked like wet cement, and he had that government employee confidence that comes from knowing most people get nervous around laminated badges. He did not offer a hand. He did not say, "Good morning." He just glanced at the paper on his clipboard and said, "Mr. Reed, this fence is in violation of the county easement line. You have 10 business days to remove the encroachment before enforcement proceeds." I stared at him for a second because honestly, my first thought was that I had misheard him. Encroachment is one of those words people use when they want a regular man to feel like he accidentally committed a felony with a fence post. I said, "Remove what now?" And he tapped the clipboard with his pen like I was already wasting his valuable time. "The fence," he said. "All posts from the south corner to the drainage bend. County mapping shows you are approximately 9 feet inside the public access corridor." Approximately. That word landed funny. I have bought lumber approximately straight. I have cooked steaks approximately medium rare. The property lines are not supposed to be approximately anything. They are either where the legal markers say they are, or they are not. I told him that fence was built off a stamped survey, same one filed when I bought the place, and he gave me this thin little smile that did not reach any human part of his face. "County records say otherwise," he said. Behind him, one of the workers shook the paint can again and kept spraying. That sound, that sharp little rattle, I swear it got under my skin worse than the actual threat. I asked the inspector his name, and he said, "Carl Renner, Hollow Creek County Compliance Office," like he was announcing himself in court. Then I asked if he had the survey he was relying on. He looked down at his clipboard, flipped one page, then another, and said, "The GIS layer is the county reference." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because there are moments in life where a person says something so wrong with so much confidence that your brain needs a second to decide whether to get angry or take notes. I said, "Carl, a GIS map is not a boundary survey." He took off his sunglasses just long enough to look at me like I had personally insulted the Constitution. "Sir," he said, "I am advising you to comply voluntarily. Once this goes to formal enforcement, costs tend to rise very quickly." There it was, the soft threat, polished up and dressed like advice, the kind of line people use when they know the paperwork itself might not scare you enough. So they mention money, and maybe it would have worked on me if I had been 20 years younger, or if I had not spent half my life dealing with lenders, insurance adjusters, contractors, and one divorce attorney who billed like he was printing gold. I knew the language. Hurry up, get scared. Do what we say before you look too closely. That was the game. Then I saw my neighbor, Dale Whitcomb, step out from behind his mailbox. Dale was a retired building supply manager who wore pressed jeans to mow grass and called every conversation a concern. 6 months earlier, He had hired a crew to reshape the slope on his front lot because he wanted what he called a cleaner driveway entrance, which was a fancy way of saying he raised his side high enough that every hard rain started pushing runoff toward my pasture gate. I complained after one storm washed gravel halfway down my drive, and Dale acted wounded. Like water obeyed friendship, and I had insulted his family by mentioning gravity. Since then, he had stopped waving, unless you count lifting 2 fingers off the steering wheel like they weighed too much. So when he walked over that morning with a travel mug and a face full of fake sympathy, I already knew he had not come to help. "Everything okay over here, Mason?" he asked, stretching my name like he was testing the flavor. Carl answered before I could. "County easement issue, Mr. Whitcomb. Just correcting an improper fence placement." Dale nodded slowly, and there it was, the smallest smile. The kind a man tries to hide but cannot quite bury fast enough. I looked at him and said, "Funny how this became an issue right after your drainage project." Dale took a sip of coffee and said, "Well, rules are rules, and suppose." I wanted to say a lot of things right then, most of them unsuitable for church parking lots in county records, but I did not. That might have been the smartest thing I did all day, because people like Carl expect anger. They know how to deal with anger. They write it down. They label you hostile. They turn your reaction into evidence that you are unreasonable. But calm makes them uncomfortable, especially calm with memory behind it. So I stood there on my own gravel, looking at orange paint on a fence I had built exactly where old Lyle Boone, the surveyor, had set the pins 12 years earlier, and I asked Carl one simple question. "Before I touch one post, are you willing to state in writing that the county physically verified the survey markers on this property?" For the first time that morning, Carl did not answer right away. The worker with the spray can stopped shaking it. Dale lowered his mug. Even the idling trucks seemed to quiet down. Carl looked at me, then at the fence, then back at his clipboard. And in that little pause, maybe 2 seconds long, I felt the whole morning shift. He cleared his throat and said, "You will receive further documentation from the office." And that was when I knew, not guessed, knew, that nobody had checked a thing. Carl finally folded the notice in half and handed it to me like he was serving papers in a movie, and I took it with 2 fingers because I did not trust myself to grab it any harder. Across the top it said, "Notice of easement encroachment," and underneath that was a whole buffet of threatening little phrases: voluntary removal, civil penalties, county abatement, cost recovery, administrative hearing. All the kinds of words designed to make a regular homeowner feel like a criminal before breakfast. Carl told the crew to finish marking the line, and one of those boys, he could not have been more than 23, looked at me for half a second like he felt bad, then looked down and kept spraying. That bothered me more than I expected, not because I needed his sympathy, but because it told me even he could feel something was off. Dale stayed right there near the ditch, sipping from that silver travel mug, enjoying the show just enough to be careful about it. Carl walked back toward his truck, then turned around and gave me one last piece of friendly government wisdom. "Mr. Reed," he said, "I would not wait on this. Once the county schedules removal, you may not control the cost." I nodded like I was taking advice from a man who had earned it, then said, "I appreciate the warning, Carl. I will be asking for everything in writing." His mouth tightened. Dale pretended to cough into his coffee. Then the trucks pulled out, tires crunching over my gravel, orange paint glowing along my fence like somebody had branded my land while I stood there and watched. After they left, Dale lingered, because of course he did. Some men cannot resist standing near a wound they think they helped open. He said, "You know, Mason, sometimes old surveys are not as accurate as people think." I looked at him and said, "Funny thing is, Dale, old lies usually are." He did not like that. His face went still for just a second. That quick little flash people show when you get closer to the truth than they expected. Then he shrugged and said, "Well, I hope it works out for you," and walked back across the road with the stiff shoulders of a man trying very hard not to look guilty. I stood there until his front door closed. Then I walked the fence lines slowly, post by post, touching the cold steel like I was checking on an injured animal. Every orange mark felt personal, not because paint matters, but because the message behind it does. This is not yours anymore. We can say where your land begins. We can change the story and make you prove reality. That is a strange feeling, and unless you have had somebody official challenge the edge of your own home, I do not know if I can explain how deep it goes. You start second-guessing things you watched happen with your own eyes. You remember the surveyor walking the line. You remember holding the post level while your brother poured concrete. You remember the old property pins with yellow caps sticking out of the clay. And still, because some man with a badge and a clipboard said otherwise, a little voice whispers, "What if you are wrong?" That is how power gets inside your head. It does not always kick the door down. Sometimes it just hands you a notice and lets your imagination do the rest. I went inside, dropped the paper on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the coffee in my mug went cold. For about 5 minutes, I let myself feel every ugly version of what could happen. Contractors tearing out the fence, a bill I could not afford, Dale standing at his mailbox pretending not to smile, Carl writing me up like I was some stubborn backwoods fool who thought county law did not apply to him. Then I got mad. But not hot mad, not the kind that makes you stupid. I got clear mad. That kind is useful. I pulled the old metal file box from the hall closet, the one with a dent in the lid from when my ex-wife threw it during an argument about tax receipts, and I started digging. Insurance papers, tractor repair invoices, vet records from my old shepherd Hank, closing documents. Then, finally, a blue folder with my handwriting on it, Fence and Survey 2012. I opened it, and I swear my whole body loosened. There it was, stamped boundary survey from Boone Land Services, signed by Lyle Boone himself, recorded deed reference, coordinate table, right-of-way notation, easement language, and a little sketch of the south line that matched my memory so exactly it felt like somebody had reached back 12 years and handed me a rope. I found the receipt from the fencing supplier, the invoice for concrete, and a stack of old photos my brother Nate had taken while we were building it. There I was in one picture, younger, thinner, wearing a sweat-stained Reds cap, standing next to a corner pin while Nate held a post-hole digger like a weapon. In another photo you could see the yellow survey cap clear as day, sitting 3 inches from the string line. I sat down and looked at those pictures longer than I needed to, because they brought back my brother laughing in the heat, my dad's old truck parked under the walnut tree, the smell of cut cedar, all of it. That fence was not just a line. It was a record of a time when I still believed hard work made things settled. Around 9 that night, after 2 sandwiches I'd barely tasted and 3 hours of sorting papers into piles, I remembered something important. Hollow Creek County had switched to a new online mapping portal about 2 years earlier. I only knew because they had sent every landowner a postcard bragging about improved public access, which in county language usually means the website looks newer but works worse. I opened my laptop, typed in the parcel site, and waited while the page loaded with all the enthusiasm of a sleepy mule. The map finally came up, and I found my property by parcel number. Then I turned on the easement layer. At first, I understood why Carl felt brave. The bright blue corridor line appeared to slice right into my fence by several feet, maybe close to the 9 feet he mentioned. But when I zoomed in, something looked crooked, not my fence. The overlay, the easement line was not following the deeded road curve the way it should have. That looked shifted, like somebody had taken a transparent sheet and slid it sideways without lining up the corners. I pulled up my survey and compared the coordinates. Then I opened old aerial imagery, then an archived parcel layer from before the portal update. That older layer matched my survey. The new one did not. I leaned back from the laptop and said out loud to nobody, "Well, I will be damned." That was the moment fear left the room and irritation sat down in its chair, because this was not some complicated legal mystery. It was lazy verification dressed up as enforcement. Somebody trusted a digital layer without checking the dirt. Somebody saw a map on a screen and decided that was enough to threaten a man into tearing down a fence that had been legal for 12 years. I kept going, because once you find one loose board, you start checking the whole porch. I measured the offset on the screen. I saved screenshots. I marked where the county layer drifted from the recorded parcel boundary. I compared the right-of-way notation in my survey to the deed language. I even found the old county road maintenance map from 2006 buried in a downloadable PDF, and that matched my fence too. By midnight, my kitchen table looked like a detective had been living there rent-free. Papers everywhere, laptop open, printer coughing out pages, highlighter uncapped, and me in the middle of it wearing reading glasses from the dollar store like I was preparing for a Supreme Court argument over 47 feet of steel posts. And maybe that sounds ridiculous, but it did not feel ridiculous. It felt like survival, because I understood something then that I wish every homeowner understood before the trouble starts. Institutions do not need to be evil to hurt you. They just need to be careless with enough confidence. One bad layer, one rushed inspection, one neighbor with a grudge, one man like Carl who would rather sound certain and be certain. And suddenly you were fighting for something you already own. I thought about calling him right then. I had his office number on the notice. I imagined leaving a voicemail so sharp it could peel paint off the wall. But then I looked at Dale's house across the road. One yellow porch light burning through the dark, and I slowed myself down. Anger would feel good for 10 minutes. A paper trail would work better in the morning. So I opened a new email. No insults, no threats, no dramatic speeches, just facts, lined up like fence posts. I wrote that I was requesting immediate verification of the alleged encroachment before any enforcement action proceeded. I attached the stamped survey, the deed reference, photos from the original installation showing visible survey markers, screenshots of the current GIS easement layer, screenshots of the archived parcel layer, and a side-by-side comparison showing the offset. Then I wrote one sentence that I knew would make somebody higher up sit straighter in their chair, based on the attached records. It appears the current GIS easement overlay may be misaligned with the recorded boundary and prior county mapping, and I'm requesting confirmation that physical markers were verified before the notice was issued. That was it. Calm, boring, dangerous. I sent it to Carl, but not only to Carl. I copied the county survey records office, the road department coordinator, the compliance supervisor, and because I was feeling generous, the general county clerk inbox too. If they wanted to make this official, fine. I could make it official in every direction. I hit send at 12:48 a.m. and watched the little message disappear. Then I sat there in the dark kitchen for a while, listening to the refrigerator hum and the wind drag loose leaves across the porch, and for the first time all day, I smiled. Not because it was over. It was not. But because the story had changed. In the morning, Carl Renner would not be dealing with a scared homeowner anymore. He would be dealing with his own paperwork. I did not sleep much that night, and anybody who tells you they sleep peacefully after sending an email that might drag a county office into admitting a mistake is either lying or has better blood pressure than I do. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click once every turn, thinking about every possible way this could go wrong. Carl could ignore it. His supervisor could protect him. The county could dig in just to save face. Dale could have friends down there. And in small towns, favors travel faster than facts. By 6 in the morning, I gave up pretending to rest, made coffee strong enough to stain a boot, and walked outside in the grey light with that strange, tight feeling in my stomach, the one you get when you know you did the right thing but still do not know if the right thing is going to cost you. The yard was quiet. The road was empty. Dale's porch light was already off, which meant he had either slept like a baby or had been watching from the dark like the nosy little gargoyle he could be. I stepped off the porch and headed toward the fence, and about halfway across the drive I stopped so suddenly my coffee sloshed over my hand. The orange paint was gone. Not faded, not washed thin by dew. Gone. Every post Carl's crew had marked the day before had been wiped clean, rubbed down so hard some of the old dust and oxidation had come off with it. I stood there for a long second, just staring, because there are moments when silence says more than a signed confession ever could. If the county still believed that fence was illegal, those marks would have stayed. If Carl's notice was solid, nobody would have driven out before sunrise and scrubbed my posts like they were hiding fingerprints. I walked the whole line just to be sure, and every single mark had disappeared. No note on the door, no phone call, no apology, just a clean fence and the cold morning, which in government language is about as close to panic as you are ever going to see in public. Around 9:30, my phone rang. Hollow Creek County. I let it ring twice, because I am petty enough to admit that felt good. Then I answered. The woman on the line introduced herself as Marlene Voss from the county survey records office, and she had the kind of voice people use when they have been told by a supervisor to be polite, careful, and absolutely not say the word mistake. Mr. Reed, she said. We are currently reviewing the encroachment notice issued yesterday regarding your property. I looked out the kitchen window at the fence and said, reviewing it after the orange paint was removed, or before. It was a pause, a beautiful pause, the kind of pause you could frame and hang over a fireplace. She said, I am not aware of field activity this morning. I said, well, somebody was aware enough to clean every post before breakfast. Another pause. Then she said, "At this time, the county is not requesting any removal action from you." There it was, wrapped in bubble wrap and county letterhead without actually being written down. They were backing off. I asked her if the notice was being withdrawn. She said the matter was under internal review. I asked whether the GIS easement layer had been physically verified before Carl Renner issued the violation. Her voice got even smoother, which is never a good sign for honesty. She said, "County GIS information is intended for reference purposes and should not be interpreted as a legal boundary determination." I almost laughed into the phone. Yesterday, that same reference tool was apparently good enough to threaten me with fines and forced removal, but now that it pointed back at them, it had suddenly become just a helpful little suggestion on a screen. I said, "Marlene, I would like written confirmation that no enforcement action is pending." She hesitated, then said she would send a follow-up email. 10 minutes later, there it was. Short, dry, almost allergic to accountability, but clear enough. No current action required. Notice under review. GIS data informational. Please retain survey documentation for future reference. I printed 3 copies, because old habits are not paranoia when they keep saving you. For the next few days, nothing happened, which felt stranger than a fight would have. Carl did not call. Nobody came by. No truck tires on gravel. Dale did not wave when he drove past, but he did slow down enough to read my fence like he was waiting for it to confess something. On the 4th day, I was at Miller's Hardware buying a new latch for the barn door when I ran into a woman named Ruth Hanley, who worked part-time at the county clerk's office and knew everybody's business by accident and half of it on purpose. She nodded toward me in the aisle with the feed buckets and said, "I heard you had a little boundary excitement." I said, "That is one way to put it." She looked around like the paint cans might be listening, then said, "You did not hear it from me, but somebody filed a complaint about obstruction of public access 2 weeks before that notice." My hand tightened around that barn latch. I asked if complaints were public record. Ruth gave me a look over her glasses and said, "Some are, depending how they are filed." Then she walked away like she had not just dropped a match in dry grass. I went home and filed a records request that afternoon. Nothing dramatic, just a simple request for complaints. Internal notes, mapping references, and inspection records tied to my parcel for the past 6 months. 2 weeks later, I got a packet in the mail, and most of it was boring enough to put a raccoon to sleep. But there it was. One complaint form, typed clean, no signature on the public copy, but the description told the whole story. Fence blocks maintenance access near drainage approach. Property owner has previously disputed runoff improvements. That last sentence did not need a name. It had Dale written all over it. Not legally, maybe not provably, but spiritually, in permanent marker. I never confronted him about it, not because I was afraid, but because some men want a scene more than they want a solution, and I had already decided Dale was not getting another front row seat. A month later, the county GIS layer quietly changed. No announcement, no explanation. The blue easement line shifted back where it belonged, matching the old records, my stamped survey, and the fence that had never moved 1 inch. Carl Renner disappeared from my life completely, though I did see him once at a gas station off Route 19. He spotted me near Pump 3, froze for half a second, then went inside without buying gas. I still smile about that sometimes, not because I ruined him. I do not even know if he got in trouble, but because, for once, the man with the exit board had to live with the fact that his confidence had not been enough. These days, when the sun drops low over the pasture and the cedar shadows stretch across the gravel, I walk that fence line now and then. I run my hand along those steel posts and remember the orange paint, the trucks, Dale's little smile, Carl's polished boots, and that awful moment when a piece of paper tried to make me doubt land I had worked, paid for, and protected for more than a decade. And what sticks with me most is not anger. It is the lesson. A system does not have to hate you to hurt you. A neighbor does not have to admit a grudge to start trouble. A county does not have to be right to sound powerful. That is why you slow things down. You ask for proof. You keep your papers. You make them put every claim in writing, because confidence is not evidence, and a digital map with a crooked line is still just a crooked line. The fence never moved. The truth did not move either. The only thing that shifted was how fast the county wanted to talk once their own records started pointing back at them. So I will leave you with this, and I honestly want to know what you think. Was Carl just careless? Was Dale quietly pulling strings? Or is this one of those ugly small-town situations where ego, bad data, and the personal grudge all shook hands behind the scenes? Drop your take in the comments. And if you have ever had a neighbor, an HOA, a county office, or anybody with a clipboard try to push you around with paperwork, tell that story too, because sometimes the thing that saves your home is not shouting, not threats, not revenge. It is one old folder, one calm email, and the stubborn habit of keeping receipts.